Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're undertaking a very necessary but also a very challenging mission. We're taking a subject that is raw, it's terrifying, a moment of just profound, inexplicable tragedy. And we're going to try and submit it to a philosophical and theological examination.
Yeah, a heavy one.
A very heavy one. We are talking about the bloodshed that shattered a perfectly normal day at Bondi Beach in Australia.
Indeed. And I think it's important to say right up front, we are moving well past the immediate facts of the event.
Right.
We're not focused on the timeline or the specifics of the criminal investigation. Our source material for this, it uses this singular tragedy as a mirror.
A mirror.
Yeah, holding it up to reflect humanity's most ancient, most persistent anxieties about the nature of good, the reality of evil, and ultimately the role of the divine.
And the setting itself is so crucial here. I mean, when you hear the word Bondi, you instantly conjure these specific, really powerful cultural images.
Oh, absolutely.
Vast stretches of sand, the dazzling sun, this sense of effortless freedom, a palpable, almost guaranteed peace.
Right.
Our analysis actually begins by detailing the source's very deliberate framing of Bondi as, and this is a quote, perhaps, a modern-day Eden.
And that's not an accident. It's the ultimate Western sanctuary.
Right.
A place of leisure and light and, perceived safety.
The place where the social contract is just presumed to be absolute?
Exactly. Where the worst conceivable threat is, what, a sudden riptide? Or like you said, maybe a bad sunburn.
Right.
And that idealization, that perfect picture of peace. That's exactly why its abrupt shattering elevated this tragedy beyond just a horrific news item.
It pushed it into the realm of profound theological questioning.
Yes. The greater the perceived peace, the greater the shock when absolute malice just pierces right through it.
So, okay, here's our core mission for this deep dive. In the face of that sudden, terrible chaos, we have to grapple with the central conflict that's posed by the source material. Was this tragedy merely a random act of societal violence? An unfortunate, terrifying statistical outlier that means nothing more than what we see on the surface.
Oh.
Or did the actions of the perpetrator and then the subsequent actions of the hero expose a, quote, far deeper, more ancient theological conflict?
And our sources take a very clear structural approach to that question.
They do.
They root this entire analysis firmly in Abrahamic theology, specifically that dualistic struggle between absolute good and absolute evil.
And they use these huge archetypes to do it.
They do. They utilize the classic defining archetype of the devil, or the adversary, to interpret the modern actions of the perpetrator.
And then on the flip side,
they leverage the concept of divine grace, of agape, of sacrifice, to understand and really elevate the actions of the hero.
So we're going deep into the source's framing of this event as a direct confrontation. I mean, the framing is literally when heaven met hell, right there on the sand.
Yeah.
So we need to meticulously pull apart the arguments for both the spiritual interpretation, which sees cosmic forces at play,
and the purely secular interpretations, which, insist on radical human agency.
We have to make sure we give both of those viewpoints their due weight.
Okay, so let's unpack this dense material. I think we should start, as the source does, with the shadow.
With the evil.
With the nature of the evil presented. Because that really sets the stage for everything that follows.
Okay, we're moving into part one. The embodiment of evil and the problem of divine silence.
Right.
And our source material, it immediately turns its focus to the attacker. It urges us to look past the conventional categories of crime.
Right, like theft or assault.
Exactly. And to see instead the incarnation of malice. And that is a heavy, very deliberate choice of language.
It is. And what's fascinating here is the precise way the source material interprets the perpetrator's actions to align him with that ancient archetype of the adversary.
Can you unpack that a little, the adversary?
Sure. In Abrahamic theology, the adversary isn't just a bad guy. He's not just a criminal.
He's more than that.
He is the spirit of negation itself, the embodiment of chaos, of temptation, and of destruction purely for its own sake.
And the key element that the source uses to link the attacker to this ancient defining archetype is, well, it's the motive, or rather the lack of one.
The lack of a comprehensible terrestrial or, profitable motive.
Yes. The source makes this chilling observation that the attacker acted indiscriminately and his actions were, quote, devoid of logical motive.
And that detail, that is the philosophical linchpin for this entire side of the argument.
How so?
Well, if we connect this observation to, the broader context of moral philosophy, the source is drawing a really critical distinction.
Between different types of evil?
In a way, yes. A crime committed for material gain theft, for example, or political terrorism that has specific demands, even revenge that's rooted in a personal grudge.
Okay, I see.
All of those possess a discernible, albeit twisted, human logic. You can map the motivation. You can understand the cause and effect, even if you condemn it.
Right, you can attribute them to the 7 deadly sins, greed, envy, wrath. They're human frailties, just taken to a horrifying extreme.
Precisely. But the source argues that an act driven by what it calls a pure, unprovoked malignancy suggests something fundamentally different.
Something non-human almost.
Or perhaps anti-human. It's destruction that is completely detached from any self-serving goal. The act is an act of anti-creation.
Anti-creation?
Yeah. The only intent is to inflict suffering and to damage the established order.
So the source is framing the intent here, not as a desire to get something, but purely to tear apart order and inflict suffering.
Yes.
So when the source says the attacker walked among the people like the ancient legends of the adversary, it implies the challenge wasn't just to the individual lives he took.
No, not at all.
It was a challenge to the very concept of communal security, of trust, of the peace that Bondi symbolized.
Exactly. The spirit of the devil, this force of negation, it fundamentally challenges creation. It doesn't build. It only seeks to dismantle and poison the system.
And the random nature of it all.
The indiscriminate nature of this attack, targeting random people, families, just enjoying a moment of leisure, it fits this definition perfectly, according to the source material. It's a calculated assault on harmony itself.
The chaos is the reward.
The chaos is the entire point.
And okay, once you establish that profound, chaotic level of malice, the inevitable theological conflict just arises immediately for anyone watching.
Of course.
And that is the crisis of faith, the classical problem of divine silence.
Which raises the dilemma that has plagued philosophers and theologians for millennia, right? The problem of evil.
Can you just define that for us, just so we're all on the same page?
At its core, it's a paradox. If we accept the traditional tenets that God is omnipotent, all-powerful, and simultaneously benevolent, all good, then how do we reconcile those two attributes with the existence of pure, unprovoked, and absolute suffering, like the events that happened at Bondi?
Our sources directly confront this. They ask that really uncomfortable question. Why did the all-powerful, all-good entity permit this atrocity?
And not just anywhere, but in a place that, as we established, represented safety, the fulfillment of worldly joy.
It forces a confrontation with the very foundations of theodicy.
Which is the attempt to justify God's actions, or, in this case, his non-actions.
And the source material here, it specifically focuses not just on the presence of evil.
No, that's the key distinction. It zeroes in on God's silence.
What's the difference?
Well, historically, religious traditions have offered various explanations for suffering. Maybe it's a consequence of the fall from grace, or it's a test of faith.
That's the Augustinian theodicy, right?
Yeah, right, or it's a character-building exercise, which is the Iranian theodicy. There are frameworks to try and make sense of it.
But all of those explanations, they seem to require a voice, a directive from God, a sense of meaning behind the suffering, even if it's a harsh meaning.
Precisely. But the source argues that when a disaster like this strikes, when this pure malignancy just manifests out of nowhere, the deepest challenge is the lack of any divine intervention, or even an explanation.
The silence itself.
That silence, the source suggests, is potentially more corrosive to faith than the evil act itself. It's the deepest challenge to faith.
Because it creates this terrifying existential void.
Exactly.
I mean, if a believer could receive a sign or an explanation, even a painful one, they might find a way to place the tragedy into some kind of cosmic narrative.
They could find meaning.
But when the divine is utterly silent, that void is filled only with randomness and chaos.
And the question shifts. It goes from the practical, why did this happen to these specific people?
To the existential. Is anyone in charge? Is anyone even listening to the cries?
Yeah. That absence, that perceived indifference, is interpreted by the source as potentially the most damaging aspect of the whole tragedy. It leaves humanity feeling abandoned on a spiritual battlefield.
And that's critical. This sense of abandonment, it demands a response from us, from humanity.
It has to. If the highest power is silent, the source compels us to look elsewhere for agency, for meaning, and for resistance.
And that sets up the dramatic necessity for the hero's action.
It's the ultimate setup. If the forces of chaos and malice are allowed free rein and the divine response is, completely muted.
Then the entire structure of human morality just hangs in the balance.
But the narrative structure of the source material pivots exactly there. It moves from the shadow of the demonic to the profound redemptive reflection of light.
Okay, so let's transition into part 2, the reflection of divine grace and the sacrifice.
Right.
So if the first section established this horrific theological problem, the presence of absolute evil in the face of divine silence, this part introduces the essential human answer.
And the source material deliberately uses the heroic action as the necessary immediate counterpoint to all that malignant chaos.
It's a direct response.
It is. We're told of one figure who made a conscious, radical choice, willingly engaging the attacker.
And not just engaging, but specifically to draw the danger onto himself, to protect others.
Yes, and he suffered 2 gunshot wounds as a direct result of this choice.
That action, that immediate deliberate choice to absorb harm and shield the community instead of following the natural self-preserving instinct to flee, that is what defines the hero in this framework.
And the source immediately draws the spiritual parallel. It's not subtle about it.
Not at all.
It states it plainly.
Yeah.
If the attacker was the incarnation of the demonic, then this hero is the reflection of divine grace.
It establishes a perfect moral dualism, played out violently right there on the sand.
And what's crucial to analyze here is how the source defines the nature of the divine that the hero is reflecting.
Okay.
In this context, the source insists that God is not just the supreme ruling entity, not just a king on a throne.
God is something else.
Fundamentally, God is the manifestation of supreme love, which it calls agape, and self-sacrifice.
And focusing on that word, agape, is so key. It's not just a passing reference to affection or friendship.
No, it's a very specific technical term. In classical philosophical and theological terms, agape is the highest form of love.
It's unconditional, pure,
Yeah,
sacrificial.
right. It's completely distinct from philia, which is more like brotherly love, or eros, which is romantic or desirous love.
So what makes agape different?
It's purely outgoing. It seeks absolutely nothing in return. It is the unconditional giving of the self for the good of the other.
And the source argues that the hero's action was rooted in this agape.
Yes, a transcendent primal impulse to live for others, as the source puts it, completely devoid of any self-interested motive, whether that be survival or fame or any personal gain.
It was an outpouring of supreme altruistic concern for the threatened community.
And the source analysis suggests that this selfless action is perhaps the closest humanity ever comes to tangibly embodying the divine nature.
That's a huge claim.
It is. It's an act that completely transcends the base biological imperative of self-preservation.
It's not about you anymore.
It's an act of actively giving your life energy, your time, your safety to others, even at the ultimate cost of your own well-being.
And that brings us to the profound theological weight of the choice itself.
Right.
Free will.
Right. The source material meticulously analyzes that critical moment when the hero faced a binary choice.
Flee or fight.
Run away, which is the rational, self-preserving, survival-based choice, or stand his ground against an overwhelming lethal danger.
And that decision, the source contends, was the ultimate exercise of his free will against the powerful, chaotic temptation towards self-interest.
And that is a powerful resolution to the dilemma that we talked about in part 1.
How so? It feels like it answers the silence.
Well, if the demonic element is the temptation toward chaos and, self-preservation at all costs,
then the heroic choice is the affirmation of moral order.
Freely and consciously chosen by a human agent. It functions as proof that not only does free will exist, but that it can triumph over the most terrifying forces of destruction.
But the implications are even deeper than just affirming free will, aren't they?
Oh, much deeper. The source introduces this concept of redemptive suffering.
Redemptive suffering.
The hero wasn't just defending. He wasn't just fighting back. He deliberately chose to absorb the suffering. He made his body a literal shield against the chaos.
And that concept, it immediately connects this very modern act to the most ancient rituals.
Absolutely. According to the source, this choice links directly to the scapegoat archetype.
Which is one of those profoundly heavy, historically resonant concepts in all of theology and anthropology.
It really is. Maybe we should take a moment just to elaborate on that archetype as the source sees it.
Please.
Okay, so in ancient traditions, and this is detailed very clearly in the book of Leviticus in the Old Testament, a goat would symbolically have the sins and the suffering of the entire community laid upon it. The high priest would literally lay his hands on it.
And then what?
And then that animal, the scapegoat, would be driven out into the wilderness, symbolically carrying the community's evil and impurity away with it.
And in doing so, it would purify the group and restore social harmony.
Exactly.
So when our source material details the hero standing in the path of the malice, shedding his own blood to redeem others from immediate harm,
It is explicitly calling this a modern-day reenactment of the scapegoat archetype
he is willingly absorbing the community's chaos.
and the destructive intent of the aggressor. He's neutralizing that malignant energy through his own personal sacrifice and suffering.
So the ultimate takeaway from this section, as the source frames it, is this profound statement about human agency, especially when the divine is absent or silent.
Yes. The heroic action declared that even if God is silent, even if the voice from heaven is absent and the problem of evil appears totally unsolvable.
Quote, his will and love can manifest through the free choices of humanity.
Humanity becomes the active vessel for the divine purpose.
The hero wasn't just sitting there waiting for a miracle to save the day.
He was the miracle.
Yeah.
He demonstrated that the capacity for self-sacrifice and for supreme love is an inherent, durable feature of the human condition.
His free choice proved that the moral infrastructure of the universe can be maintained through human action.
Regardless of whether a benevolent deity is directly pulling the strings or not.
The sheer spiritual force of this choice, this moment of radical, self-chosen altruism, it shifts the entire theological narrative.
It does. It moves the whole conversation from the despair of divine silence to the enduring hope represented by the manifest will of God expressed through human freedom.
So here's where the philosophical rubber really meets the road. We've established the horrific necessity of the devil, this idea of pure malice, and the redemptive power of the hero, this supreme love. Now, Part 3 forces us into what the source calls the ultimate debate.
Which is, what does this entire tragic dualism actually prove about the nature of the cosmos? What does it all mean?
Exactly. And the source presents two highly divergent philosophical viewpoints on this. It essentially frames the question as whether the event proves God's ultimate non-involvement and absence,
Or conversely, whether it actually confirms his meticulous existence by demonstrating these necessary counterpoints in the world.
it's a huge fork in the road. Let's start with viewpoint A, the deterministic interpretation.
Okay. This view attempts to fold the entire event, both the initial horror and the subsequent heroism, into a grand, preordained divine plan.
So nothing was an accident.
Nothing. This argument suggests that evil is not an error in the system. It's not a temporary lapse. It's a necessary and permitted counterpoint by God.
A counterpoint. So in this deterministic framework, suffering and malice, they aren't defects.
No, they're functional tools. They are the testing mechanism required to validate human faith and devotion.
The logic there is that God allows and maybe even sets up these trials specifically to test the quality of our faith and our moral resolve.
Right, because if there were no genuine suffering, no costly choice, our devotion would be meaningless.
It would be cheap.
It would lack true commitment and sacrifice. The cost is what validates the commitment.
And following this deterministic thread, the hero's emergence, that's interpreted not as a random act of human bravery emerging from the chaos.
No, it's seen as a divinely placed piece on the cosmic chessboard.
It wasn't accidental.
He was an essential, necessary part of the test from the very beginning, a strategically deployed countermeasure, if you will.
And the source suggests that this heroic figure serves as the irrefutable proof of God's enduring hope for humanity.
Exactly. Even in the darkest moments, the deterministic view finds comfort in the assurance that the entire event, as horrifying as it was ultimately managed.
Managed to maintain a metaphysical balance and affirm ultimate goodness.
The profound comfort offered by this view is the assurance that nothing is truly random. Even the horror serves a high, inscrutable purpose,
And that higher purpose always guarantees a path toward redemption.
which God ensured was available via the hero's self-sacrifice.
But, okay, if we accept that comfort, we run directly into a tension that the source itself champions in other sections.
Free will.
Free will. If the hero was merely a divinely placed piece, doesn't that fundamentally undermine the concept of radical free will?
It does.
It seems to completely contradict the idea that the hero made an independent, self-sacrificing choice against his own biological imperative.
And that is the essential critical tension in the source material. It's why the analysis then pivots so dramatically to viewpoint B.
The radical free will interpretation.
Yes. This view strips away the notion of divine puppet strings entirely. And it places the overwhelming responsibility for both the tragedy and the triumph squarely, and frankly, terrifyingly, on humanity's shoulders.
So the core idea here is that God, in his act of creation, granted total, genuine freedom.
And that means freedom to commit the most heinous, chaotic acts, the pure malice we discussed.
But also the ultimate radical freedom to act with selfless divine love, the agape.
So both the evil act and the heroic act were therefore purely human choices. God set the stage and then stepped back.
This interpretation gives human actions ultimate independent significance.
It really does. It means we cannot attribute blame, or for that matter, thanks, to an external deity for the immediate results. It was purely human agency, either tragically misused or magnificently affirmed.
And this path, this radical reliance on self-determination, it leads to perhaps the most profound and revolutionary theological concept introduced by the source material.
It's a big one.
The hero is viewed as the self-saving God.
That phrase, the self-saving God, is incredibly provocative. Let's just sit with that for a moment and define precisely what the source is implying there. It means that the divine, instead of intervening externally in the crisis, has instilled the capacity for salvation within humanity itself.
So the human microcosm mimics the macrocosm of the divine.
Perfectly put. If the essence of the divine, as we defined it earlier, is supreme love and self-sacrifice agape,
then when a human being freely chooses that sacrificial act, they are functionally playing the role of the Savior.
Exactly. It redefines salvation not as a gift that's bestowed from on high, but as a potential that is inherent in human nature, realized through a free and costly choice.
It's humanity saving itself.
Through its own divinely inspired capacity for sacrifice.
You know, that is a concept that is simultaneously deeply empowering and utterly terrifying.
It is.
It's empowering because humanity holds the power for its own fate and its own redemption. But it's terrifying because there is no safety net.
No guarantee.
No guarantee that the divine peace will always appear when the demonic shadow strikes. If humanity fails to choose agape, then chaos wins.
And this radical reliance on human agency leads directly into what the source calls the secular warning.
Right, and this moves beyond classic theology and starts to address the state of modern Western society itself.
The warning is severe. It's directly aimed at our, post-religious context.
It asks the question, in an increasingly secularized, rationalized world, have we lost our collective sense of absolute evil?
And what does that mean, to lose that sense?
Well, if you remove the theological concept of the devil or the adversary as a real metaphysical force,
then evil risks becoming just sociological or purely psychological or entirely situational.
it becomes relative. It can be explained away by socioeconomic mitigating factors or pathologized by a clinical diagnosis like antisocial personality disorder.
And the source suggests that losing a reference point for absolute evil pure malice with no logical motive makes it incredibly difficult to identify, confront, and morally condemn true malignancy when it manifests in this unprovoked, chaotic way.
So if the evil act at Bondi is simply reduced to a man having a severe psychiatric breakdown or a statistical reaction to social alienation,
it dilutes the sheer intentional malignancy that our source initially connected to that demonic archetype.
we lose the moral clarity.
We lose the moral clarity that's necessary for a society to stand together against pure destruction. The confrontation becomes clinical, not moral.
And this creates a vacuum. A vacuum this secular society must then actively fill.
It must. The source argues we have to redefine and elevate the human acts of heroism and sacrifice to a level of what it calls secular divinity.
Secular divinity, that's a powerful demand.
It is. It's essentially saying we need to find a way to grant these purely human transcendent acts, this free choice to sacrifice, a sacred, non-negotiable value, even in a non-religious context.
So we need to treat them with the same awe, the same reverence, the same unconditional validation that religious traditions reserve for their martyrs and their saints.
Yes. To maintain the moral fabric of society, the source implies that the heroism at Bondi must be treated as a moment of profound, sacred illumination.
And the value of that selfless act has to be considered absolute.
Whether you attribute the source of that illumination to God or to the ultimate free choice of a man rejecting his own self-interest.
It connects the human choice directly back to the necessity of order.
Right. If the evil sought to destroy order, the sacrifice reestablishes it.
Yeah.
By affirming the value of others' lives above one's own, which is a core moral foundation for any functioning civilization, whether it's religious or secular, the hero validates humanity's purpose.
So after all of that, what does this all mean for us? for you, the listener. This deep dive has traveled from a peaceful Australian beach through ancient theological battlefields and right into the core debate over human agency.
It's been quite a journey, and what we've witnessed is this dynamic interplay. The devil, representing that pure, unprovoked malignancy, inflicted the pain.
And then we saw the hero, the reflection of Agape, willingly absorb and neutralize that pain.
The source argues that together they form a striking, essential, modern theological image. The crisis and the human-initiated response.
And the enduring utility of this analysis, I think, is that it provides a robust framework for understanding and processing chaos.
Regardless of your personal theological stance.
Exactly. Whether you see the source of the hero's strength as divinely inspired or purely a triumph of radical human ethics, the result is undeniable.
Life protected, chaos mitigated, order affirmed.
And the source material? It forces a core personal choice onto you, the listener. It pulls the dualism out of this tragic event and applies it directly to our daily lives.
We are compelled to ask, when we are faced with chaos, with malice, or even just simple friction and difficulty in our own lives, how do we exercise our free will?
Do we choose to embody the shadow of the demonic, spreading fear, adding to the disorder, seeking to tear apart fragile order through cynicism or anger?
Or do we choose to be the divine reflection, the manifestation of Agape that steps forward, that chooses love and sacrifice and the protection of others?
Even if it's only through small acts of kindness and moral courage.
The source asks us to understand that we are constantly exercising our free will in this eternal conflict. Every choice we make tips the balance slightly.
And not necessarily toward heaven or hell in some cosmic sense.
But toward chaos or toward order? Toward self-interest or toward Agape? That moment of choice is the sacred ground.
So this deep dive, it leaves us with one final provocative thought that really synthesizes everything we've discussed. It's the ultimate question of spiritual causation versus human agency.
It's a question for you to contemplate long after the sirens have faded, long after the immediate news cycle has moved on from this.
The source asks rhetorically, was the Bondi hero's wound a mark left by Satan or a medal conferred by God?
And let's just break down the implications of that question one last time.
A mark left by Satan. That suggests that the suffering was directly inflicted by the forces of pure evil. It's a physical testament to the pain and destructive malice that permeates the world through the misuse of freedom.
It's a painful symbol of the cost of chaos.
Or was it a medal conferred by God?
Which suggests that the sacrifice was recognized and spiritually validated by the highest power, a sign of eternal honor for the ultimate act of selflessness and freely chosen love. It is a symbol of redemption and of order.
The answer, according to the ultimate philosophical debate the source sets up for us, might well be that it was both.
It was a wound inflicted by human freedom misused, but simultaneously a medal earned by human freedom divinely chosen.
The choice ultimately remains ours. Thank you for joining us on The Deep Dive.